What's up, YouTube? Winterguard here. So today we're going to get into corrupting items, pros and cons, and when not to do it, and what are the results. So let's jump into it. So we're going to get into corruption and corrupting items and what happens when you do that and when you should do it. You've probably seen the corrupted tag on items. I'll show you one real quick here. This is at the bottom, you see corrupted. This is where there's two options to this. You can do this through a quest line. There's a shrine you could do it. And also through veil orbs right here, which will corrupt an item, as it states. Modifies an item unpredictably and corrupts it. So we're going to look into this, and I'm going to show you the potential outcomes if you try and corrupt an item. We'll do a corruption on an item at the end here, and just to see what happens. So basically, here's what happens when you corrupt an item. First off, as you'll see on the orb, it says it cannot be modified again. So this is very important. If you corrupt an item, you cannot do anything with it afterwards. You cannot use an exalted orb to add another modifier. You can't use a chaos orb to pull a modifier off, and nothing happens. Once it's corrupted, it's untouchable at that point. You can't do anything else with it. So what are the outcomes for using a corruption on an item? First off, nothing can happen. So I did this to my staff. I didn't really know what corruption did. I vaguely understood the concept, but I just had this staff and I was like, let's see what happens. I threw a veil orb on it. Nothing changed except it added the corrupted tag at the bottom. So that is one of the outcomes. No change. It could just be, you just can't do anything afterwards. It's got the corrupted tag, you can't modify it. But there can be a no change mod to it. Also, what can happen? It can modify the stats that are on it. Like it could re-roll the stats. So say for instance, the 58 increased spell damage, it could change the value of that modifier. It can re-roll that to a different value. It cannot change it. I've seen different variations on what people are saying about this. Some saying it can re-roll up to all of the stats on it. I've seen people say only 3, so I'm not 100% on which is actually true. But if you got examples where it re-rolled more than 3, I'd love to hear about it, so let me know in the comments. So another option that can happen, it can re-roll, let's back up. On the implicit modifier, as you can see, items have implicit stats that don't count as one of the 6. As you can see on this one, the Grant skill level lightning bolt, level 12 lightning bolt, that is an implicit modifier. That doesn't count towards the total 6 that you can have on an item. An item can roll up to 6 mods on it. The implicit does not count. The corruption itself can take it away, take the implicit away. It can add another one. The corruption does potentially modify the implicits as well. So keep that in mind for when you're looking to see what the corruption changed. Another thing that's really important, it can add sockets to an item. It could also remove them. See, this armor has 2 sockets on it. Now this base armor here can only get 2. The corruption can take it above that limit. It can make it 3 sockets. It could also take one of these away. Like you also see this like on gloves and boots. Normally 1 socket is the most you can get. With a corruption, you can add a second socket. Keep that in mind when you're looking to see what a corruption changes. You can add more sockets than a base item would normally have. It can add up to 1 more. So another important feature of that. And it's not just items that you can use the corruption on. You can do it on skills. Say for instance, take Spark for instance here on my sorceress. So right now I have 3 socket slots for supports. So to add more, you need jeweler orbs. These. The lesser jeweler orb adds 1 more socket if you have 2. I think it's greater that adds 1 more if you have 3, and then the last one adds 1 more if you have 4. Now, these last two are extremely hard to get. I still haven't found one. You can take a chance with the corruption. It could potentially add another socket here. It could also take one away. But here's the thing. If say I have these three and I corrupt it and I gain a fourth, I cannot at that time add a fifth with a perfect jeweler's orb. Since this just skills gem is corrupted, you can't modify it anymore. You can't upgrade the quality of it, and you can't use another jeweler's orb to get that fifth socket. So that there's a little chance there. This is not as big a deal because you could just make another jeweler's orb, but you have to go through the process of adding the sockets again. Once something's corrupted, it cannot be modified. That's the biggest takeaway from this. You cannot modify anything that's been corrupted after it's been done. So the corruption is kind of the last variant, because you can have a really great outcome or you can completely brick a good item with corruption, because it can re-roll your stats and make them worse. So it's just how froggy you're feeling about messing with an item. We're going to take, let's just take some random, let's keep this in mind. You can do that with maps, waystones as well. You can take one and corrupt it and potentially get a bunch of extra rare stats on it. You can do that to the waystones as well. So let's take a random item here. I got some somewhere. Let's just take a random one here. Doesn't matter what it is. I just want to see if we get a corruption that... Alright. These gloves are okay. So, what are we looking at here? 14, 12, plus 1 melee skills. Alright, just random gloves. Let's see what a corruption does to these gloves. Right now it has 5 stats and no implicit, no socket. Okay, so as you can see, it added in a socket. So unfortunately, I should have taken a chance and added a socket to this and seen if we'd have gotten 2. But that would have been, if it had rolled exactly the same and I already had a socket in these gloves, it would have added a second socket, which is not available on just a base glove. You're not going to get 2 sockets on gloves unless you corrupt it. So that's kind of a cool outcome. We got an extra socket that wasn't there before. Now obviously, if you're going to try and really do a big gamble, I would have added a socket, so the outcome could have potentially been 2 sockets. So anyways, that's kind of how corruption works in a nutshell. Here's where I would not do a corruption on an item. If I had a weapon that I solely relied on that character and I didn't have a replacement for it, I would not hit it with a corruption, because if you brick it and it does something and it re-rolls the stats in a bad direction, then you've kind of tanked your item. And then you got to go shopping for another one or hope for another drop. So I wouldn't necessarily do it in that outcome. If I had one drop that was pretty good and it replaced my current weapon, I'd potentially roll a corruption on my current one and see what happens to it, since I already have a replacement for it. So just keep that in mind. If you're reliant on something that you have, I wouldn't necessarily hit it with a corruption. That might push you in a worse direction. So, and for those guys that do love to trade, you'll see them corrupt items a lot. If you look on the trade website, you'll see a lot of items with that corrupted tag, and that's where the guys just took a gamble, and we don't actually know what the previous iteration of that item was, but they corrupted it and potentially got better stat rolls on it and decided to put it up for trade. So it's just one of them games you got to play within the crafting system as you mess around with these different things. But we're going to leave it here for now. I just wanted to touch base on this corruption system, since you'll see a lot of people talking about it and you'll see it on the items. I just wanted to highlight some of the options of it, and hopefully you take away some information that's useful. Hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a comment if you have any suggestions for more, and we'll leave it here for now. Keep on farming.